In February 2022, as Russia's forces surged into Ukraine, President Putin believed victory was a mere formality. The expectation was a swift conquest, perhaps a few weeks, with Ukraine's government crumbling and red flags fluttering triumphantly over Kiev before the world even had a chance to react. Fast forward 3.5 years, and that prediction now seems like a bitter laugh. Ukraine not only survived, it stands poised to claw back every inch of its occupied land, while Russia, through its desperation, risks turning every hope of reasserting control into ash. How did this happen? It's no mere fantasy or optimistic rhetoric, it's a brutal reality driven by cold calculations and alarming strategic shifts. Russia finds itself in an increasingly dire situation, depleting its resources, time, and options. With each passing day, Ukraine grows more tenacious and inventive, turning the tide of war in its favor. Recent analyses highlight the staggering losses on the Russian side. Over 23,000 units of Russian military equipment have been reported lost, damaged, or captured, contrasting sharply with Ukraine's losses, which stand at nearly 9,900. In 3.5 years, the balance of power has shifted dramatically. The once mighty military machine that Russia leaned on has been whittled down by fierce Ukrainian resistance and astute tactics. As of late September 2025, Russia had lost roughly 10,300 armored vehicles, compared to Ukraine's far fewer losses of 3,800. The bleak truth is that these aren't losses easily replaced. The backbone of Russia's military hardware originated from Soviet-era stockpiles built during the Cold War, resources that are quickly dwindling. Initially, experts estimated Russia possessed about 12,000 tanks in reserve. Now, those stocks are being rapidly consumed. Military analysts warned that if Russia cannot enhance its productive capabilities, its reserves of reparable military equipment could dwindle to nothing within a year. Yet even as Russia grapples with these losses, Ukraine has been silently remaking the landscape of modern warfare. While Russia has struggled to maintain momentum, Ukraine has upgraded its defensive systems and enhanced strategy layers through drones and advanced surveillance. What happened next was nothing short of transformation. By early 2025, Russia's territorial gains had plunged to an alarming low. Intelligence assessments reported that in March alone, Russian forces seized a meager 51 square miles, down from 282 square miles just a few months earlier. Gone are the days when Russia could confidently push forward. It now needs an overwhelming number of assaults just to hold ground. With every new day, Ukraine counters every Russian assault, fortifying its positions and executing clever maneuvers that leave their larger opponent scrambling. By appointing skilled generals and reforming their military strategy, Ukrainian forces have not just held the line but have begun reclaiming land effectively. In the dramatic clash that followed, during the Battle of Dobrpilya, Ukrainian forces captured over 100 Russian soldiers, with thousands more rendered combat ineffective. The tide of battle shifted dramatically, with drone strikes decimating advanced troops, and Ukrainians reclaiming vast territories in rapid succession. Amidst this chaos, a far graver threat loomed for Putin's regime. Russia's economic stability, once thought to be an asset, has ironically become a source of its unraveling. Oil and gas revenues, the lifeblood of its economy, plummeted by 35% year-over-year as Western sanctions took hold. What was once a source of military strength transformed into an Achilles heel, driving the nation closer to economic ruin. In this moment of desperation, how will Russia respond? With dwindling resources and rising global isolation, can Russia maintain its military objectives, or are those dreams crumbling alongside its economy? As Ukraine forges ahead with burgeoning military capabilities, the outcome of this relentless conflict hangs in the balance, ripe with uncertainty and the very real possibility of reclaiming lost sovereignty. The struggle continues, but one thing remains clear: the ghosts of old assumptions are now haunting Russia in ways it never anticipated. In the shadow of staggering losses, Russia has destroyed 10,300 armored vehicles, while Ukraine has only lost 3,800. These grim figures come from the end of September 2025. After over 43 months of brutal conflict. Now, imagine the deafening roar of engines fading, the acrid stench of burnt metal lingering in the air, the cold grip of reality tightening as we dig deeper. Is Putin's mighty army about to crumble under its own weight, revealing ancient relics from a bygone era that can't save the day? Picture vast warehouses, dusty shelves groaning under the weight of forgotten machines, stockpiled during the Cold War's icy dread, in case World War III erupted. Russia plunged into Ukraine with 13,000 to 16,000 tanks, and a staggering 11,400 armored personnel carriers. But these numbers tell a harrowing tale of irreversible depletion. Half of what's been obliterated drags from Soviet-era caches, amassed over decades, anticipating Armageddon. Yet now, those treasures dwindle, hemorrhaging at a terrifying pace. Remember, experts at National Interest claimed early 2020's reserves held roughly 12,000 tanks. But 5 years later, that hoard is nearly extinct, scavenged to fuel a feudal flame. Military analyst Andrew Tarasenko ominously predicts reparable stockpiles could vanish in 12 to 18 months, unless production surges to 700,000 armored vehicles yearly. A daunting target that exposes Russia's fragile core. Can their factories really scale the summit, or are they doomed to collapse under pressure? The stark truth bites. Current capacity spits out just 250 T-90M tanks and 460 BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles annually. Far below the carnage's demand, as losses mount like relentless waves. Desperation grips Moscow, forcing a raid on history's closet. Dragging out relics, long mothballed in silence. They began with gleaming upgrades. T-72s, T-80s, T-90s humming forward. But by May 2022, they unleashed T-62s, relics from another time. And whispers grew by November 2024. Of mobilizing T-34s, tanks that roared in World War II, though none confirmed on today's bloodied fields. Even then, this retreat signaled peril, a warning Russia could never pivot, never summon the changes to endure. Strategic shifts, buried under hubris and haste. Oh, the irony stings, as Ukraine innovates, wielding drones like silent predators, surveillance layers peeling back Russia's veils, denying any foothold, grinding their momentum to dust. By early 2025, territorial seizures plunged. British intel and deep state maps showed a meager 51 square miles snatched in March. Erosion from February's 74 and January's 125. A freefall compared to November 2024's 282. Offensives escalated late 2024, but fizzled swiftly, leaving Russia clawing. Pay per kilometer skyrocketing. Deep state calcs reveal over 35 assaults needed per square kilometer in March, up from 14.2 in February, and 7.1 in November. Fivefold the fury, to grasp a sliver of ground. Tracing back to Ukraine's revolution. General Mikhailo Drapati's January 2025 command of the Kozhenia forces. A pivot of brilliance. Targeting logistics veins, bloodlines of supply. Rotating brigades for fresh steel, veteran units pressing, fortifications bulwarking like iron spines. Results? Seismic. By September 2025. Pokrovsk's capture yielded 62 square kilometers, in 1 month defied Putin's boasts. Coordinated swarms, drone hordes buzzing death, ground thrusts, forging 3 encirclements. Dobrapilia's blow alone netted over 100 captives. 1,300 slain. 1,100 maimed. The air thick with surrender's echoes, fingers raised in defeat. Combat feeds captured the horror. Out of 10 advancing Russians, 1 lone soul survived to yield. As Russia's drought deepens, Ukraine blooms. Their defense industry renaissance surges to $35 billion by 2025. From 2022's meager billion. Now crafting 1/3 of arms, ammo, equipment. Drones? Nearly all. 100% homegrown, as Western factories lag, unable to match the flood of cheap vials. What twist awaits, as Russia's coffers empty, forcing bets on far-off buyers, at crippling discounts? Will this gamble ignite an inferno, or quench the flames for good? The battlefield whispers devastation, but the horizon teems with unseen storms, ready to unravel everything we think we know. As Russia's antique tanks from World War II rolled out, a sign they can't keep this going without seismic shifts that never arrived, Ukraine quietly transformed warfare. They layered defenses, surveillance, and drones to block Russia's momentum everywhere. By early 2025, Russia's grabs of land crumbled. British intel and Ukraine's deep state site showed a mere 51 square miles seized in March 2025. Down from 74 in February and 125 in January. That's a nosedive from over 282 square miles in November 2024. Russia sped up attacks late 2024, but flameout came fast, dozen weeks at most. More damning? The sweat Russia pours for every mile. Deep state figured over 35 assaults per square kilometer in Kharkiv, Luhansk, and Donetsk oblasts that March, up from 14.2 in February and 7.1 in November. Russia now launches 5 times more ops for scraps of ground than 6 months ago. What's pinching them? A January 2025 twist, General Mikhailo Drapati commanding the theater operational and strategic grouping of forces. He bombed Russian supply lines, fresh brigades rotating out to reload, veterans crushing forward, bunkers popping up near places like Pokrovsk. It starved Russian pushers, bleeding their fight power dry. The payoff? Loud and clear. By September 2025, Ukraine seized key ground in Pokrovsk via buzzing drone packs and boots-on-ground maneuvers, trapping Russian units in 3 nasty circles. In the clash at Dobrotpilia alone, 100 Russians taken prisoner. 1,300 dead, 1,100 hurt. Imagine this, the roar of engines fading into explosive silence, the acrid stench of burning oil choking the air, the brutal grip of freezing mud clinging to boots as soldiers flee in terror. Did Putin really think his blitzkrieg would topple Ukraine in weeks? 3.5 years on, that delusion crumples like ancient armor. Ukraine wasn't just defending, it was evolving into an unstoppable force. Picture Russia's vaunted might crumbling, its troops haunted by the whirl of deadly drones overhead. What if Ukraine reclaimed every stolen inch, leaving Putin's empire in smoldering ruins? The truth isn't fantasy, it's arithmetic staring Putin in the face. As Russian tanks thundered across the border in February 2022, Vladimir Putin bet on swift collapse. He envisioned Kiev draped in Russian flags, the West humbled and silent. Yet here we are, nearly 43 months later, and that gamble haunts like a bad dream. Ukraine endures, defying odds, poised to claw back every speck of occupied land. Russia broods about victory, but it's torching its own military to stay afloat. Why? Because the math exposes a regime on borrowed time. Russia bleeds hardware faster than it can replenish. Analyses from the Insider, backed by Western spies, reveal over half their arsenal gone. Oryx documents nearly 23,000 Russian units wrecked, maimed, or nabbed since the start versus Ukraine's 9,900. By September 2025, Russia had forfeited 10,300 armored beasts compared to Ukraine's 3,800. With initial stocks of 13,000 to 16,000 tanks and 11,400 carriers, this depletion screams crisis. Half that loss? From Soviet hordes built for a global slugfest. Reserves dwindle alarmingly. The national interest once pegged 12,000 reserve tanks in the early 2020s. 5 years in, they've scraped the barrel. Expert Andrew Tarasenko warns fixable stocks could vanish in 12 to 18 months unless they crank out 701,000 armored vehicles yearly. But Russia churns only 250 T-90M tanks and 460 BMP-3 carriers annually. No match. Desperation creeps in, forcing Russia to unearth relics. From modern T-72s, T-80s, T-90s, they dug up T-62s by May 2022. Whispers tell of T-34's World War II dinosaurs mobilized by November 2024, though unconfirmed on the front. Each step back signaled looming doom. Yet Ukraine thrives, warping warfare with layered defenses, surveillance webs, and drones snuffing Russian thrusts. By early 2025, Moscow's gains plunged. British intel and deep state maps show 51 square miles seized in March 2025, dipping from 74 in February, 125 in January, and 282 in November 2024. A fleeting surge in late 2024 sputtered out. Costs soared, over 35 assaults per square kilometer conquered in regions like Kharkiv, Luhansk, Donetsk, up from 14.2 in February and 7.1 in November.
5 times the effort for half the payoff. A shock twist? Ukraine's edge sharpened under General Mikhailo Drapety, appointed in January 2025 to command the northern front. He sliced Russian supply veins, rotated fresh brigades for ammo dumps, deployed battle-hardened vets, and fortified bulwarks near Pokrovsk. Russian offensive stalled, forces frayed. Proof followed. Does this mark Russia's endgame? Hang on that question. As economic agony amplifies the military meltdown, Ukraine's breakthroughs screamed defiance. By September 2025, they surged in Pokrovsk's direction, sinking drone hordes with ground assaults to trap Russians thrice. In the fierce scrap for Drozdivka alone, over 100 captives swelled the count, 1,300 foes downed, 1,100 maimed. Pankivka purge complete, footage captured the drone terror's toll, 10 Russians advancing, 1 lone survivor yielding. In a single 2025 month, 62 square kilometers liberated, shredding Putin's advances everywhere lies. But the horrors compound, a fiscal tailspin choking Russia. Economy fuels arms, reverse holds true. Military missteps invited sanctions that strangled funds. Oil and gas, feeding 30 to 50% of state coffers, plummeted 35% year-on-year by May 2025. Defense gobbles 40% of the budget, Soviet-level drain. Putin slashed spending 4.4% for 2026, confessing unsustainability. Inflation worsens it, official 8 to 10% might mask 20% or more hikes in essentials. Liquid cash evaporates, economists predict end of 2025 or early 26 depletion. Central bank sounds liquidity alarms, banks bleed structural deficits cascading nationwide. Efforts to stabilize, curbs on capital, slashed rates, interventions, fritter vital war resources, erode living standards. Ukraine exploits relentlessly, striking Russian refineries and fuel hubs with drones, slashing 17% of processing prowess. Reuters ties these hits to matching revenue drops from March 2024 to 2025. Western caps skewer more. EU lids on oil fell from $60 to under $48 a barrel, crashing Urals crude from $70 to $50 annually. EU plans to ban imports by 2027, expel Moscow's top buyer. Pivot to China and India? China gouges 35% discounts, other buyers force a sneaky fleet aged ships and false guises, flagged elsewhere to dodge eyes. Maintenance nightmares, Western probes boost tanker tolls, gutting profits. Russia scavenges Soviet scraps. Can you fathom the sting of this reversal? Brace for the gut punch of Ukraine's factory firepower rising anew. Yet Ukraine blossoms in a defense blitz. In 2025, its industry swelled to $35 billion capacity, from $1 billion in 2022. Now, crafting 1/3 of its arms, ammo, gear. Drone domain? Near 100%, with the West lagging on cheap, scalable swarms. Beyond bulk, tech evolution warps the scales. A final twist, amid Russia's hollow bluster, Ukraine's renaissance isn't just survival. It's preemption, a clock ticking down Putin's pretensions. Will he watch his empire erode, or ignite a catastrophe? The chessboard flips faster than anyone dared dream. What ignites next? Stay tuned. In Russia's darkening financial abyss, the wheels are grinding to a halt. Liquid reserves evaporating like mist in the sun. Inflation strangling the air from every ruble. How much longer can Putin deny the collapse staring him in the face? Russia's economy, once a roaring engine of empire, now chokes under the weight of its own ambitions. The central bank slams the alarm. Liquidity dries up overnight. Banks crumble in structural voids. A domino effect cascades, wrecking everything from war machines to daily bread. Putin scrambles like a cornered beast. Capital controls clamp down. Interest rates plummet in desperation. Government hands shove into the gears, jamming war funding, crushing the illusion of normal life. Echoes of wartime rations haunt the streets. Ukraine strikes back, relentless as a predator's hunt. Drones hum through the air. Explosions rip oil refineries apart. Flames dance skyward. The acrid stench of burning fuel clings to the wind, costing Russia 17% of its refining might. For oil and gas, the lifeblood is bleeding out. Picture the cold winter of 2022. Snow crunching under boots. The sharp bite of frost numbing exposed skin. Putin boasting swift triumph. Ukraine quivering in surrender. But fast forward. Drones swarm like angry wasps. Strikes correlate perfectly. Reuters data nails the decline. From $70 per barrel, crashing to $50. A year of losses unveiled. Western sanctions bite deeper. Teeth sinking into Russia's wallet. EU caps oil at $60. Sliding to under $48. Tariffs choke imports. Doomsday clock ticking to 2027. Russia's export throne topples? Desperate, Russia turns to allies. China and India. But at what price? A 35% discount demanded. Humiliation in every transaction. Shadow fleets slink through seas. Fake names, foreign flags. Old ships groaning under the load. Western inspectors sniffing like hounds. Costs skyrocket. Tankers become tombs of profit. While Russia digs through rusting relics, Ukraine rises. A military renaissance blossoms. Defense industry swells to $35 billion in 2025. From meager $1 billion in 2022. A phoenix from ashes. Producing 1/3 of all arms. Ammo. Gear. Vital for the fight. In drones, near perfection. 100% homegrown. West lags. Bureaucracy stifles. Ukraine's swarm technology buzzes. Overhauling warfare. Reshaping power. Humiliating Russia's grand plans. But wait. As Ukraine's arsenal gleams, Russia's ghost tanks rumble from forgotten wars. Will ancient steel stop the modernization juggernaut? Drones whine relentlessly. Circuits hum with intelligence. Explosions paint the horizon orange. Smell of scorched earth lingers. Echoes of defeat reverberate. Yet, Russia's bravado hides the freight. Selling discounts to survive. Can fiat fleets hide the empire's naked weakness forever? Can you imagine the bitter sting of failure, as the Kremlin's shadow fleet limps through the seas, evading watchful gazes under disguising flags? Ships groaning under the weight of hidden cargoes, their hulls scarred by neglect, while the air thickens with the acrid smell of discounted oil deals that bleed Russia's coffers dry. Yet, amidst this unraveling chaos, a flame flickers in Ukraine's forge of defiance. Imagine the rhythmic hum of machinery in sunlit workshops, the sharp scent of fresh metal blending with the earthy aroma of innovation brewed in haste. Hear the engineers' urgent voices, plotting breakthroughs that humiliate the invaders, turning their once mighty arsenal into scrap in a symphony of destruction. Now, picture this pivot. From a fledgling industry worth a mere $1 billion at the war's outbreak in 2022, Ukraine's defense empire is slated to soar to a staggering $35 billion by 2025. That's right, a single nation forging its own fate, producing about 1/3 of all weapons, ammunition, and gear for its armed forces. And in the realm of drones, that figure climbs to nearly 100%, where the West falters, bogged down in bureaucracy, unable to churn out cheap, vital swarms without red tape strangling progress. But it's not just about churning out numbers, oh, no. Ukraine has shattered the mold of lethargic war machines, innovating at breakneck speed. Prototypes leap from drawing boards to the battlefield in months, not years, outpacing lumbering giants like Russia's rigid behemoth. How? Through a sprawling web of almost 900 suppliers, from gleaming factories to humble garage outposts, creating a tapestry of resilience that neither the West nor Russia can rival. One tinker's wild idea ripples through the network in days via platforms like Delta, sparking a chain reaction of ingenuity that leaves foes gasping in disbelief. The proofs pulse on every front line, vivid and unrelenting. Feel the jolt as FPV drones, nimble and merciless, tear through Russian tanks worth millions, their machines costing mere thousands,
the explosions' thunder drowning out the screams of retreating soldiers. Ukraine's naval drones, sleek shadows on the waves, have chased Russia's Black Sea fleet from Crimean shores back to their homeland ports, reclaiming vital lanes for grain ships that now sail freely, restoring exports to pre-war highs in less than 18 months. And then, the crescendo, long-range strikes that started as watchful eyes in the sky have soared into bold raids, probing Russian depths hundreds of miles away, shattering oil refineries with fiery roars, dismantling munitions dumps in cascades of blinding light, and crippling air bases that once seemed untouchable.
Each operation humiliates Putin, exposing Russia's crumbling facade, but what dark secret lies in this relentless ascent? Will Ukraine's swarm expose an even deeper wound in Russia's soul, forcing a twist no one saw coming?
Picture this, Ukraine clinging to a narrow strip of Russian soil in Kursk Oblast, even 10 months after their daring invasion began. Their defensive prowess shines through catastrophic losses for Russia, all for so little ground gained. How did a nation once poised for swift conquest in 2022 spiral into a geopolitical nightmare, watching its dreams of victory crumble under the weight of unrelenting failures? Imagine the bitter stench of defeat in the air, the deafening roar of failing engines, the gritty dust of ancient tanks rising like ghosts from forgotten wars. In a flash of memory, recall the chill of a February night in 2022, the acrid smoke from rocket launches signaling the supposed dawn of triumph, only to fade into the echoing silence of shattered ambitions. Despite Russia's relentless counteroffensives, hurling over 10,000 North Korean troops into the fray, Ukraine endured, squeezing supplies along a single paved road. Kursk became their powerful leverage, a striking display of might. Why? It dazzled the West, sparking media buzz, floodgates of donations, and bold strike policies on donated missiles. How ironic that Putin's iron grip has twisted minor losses into a boundless disaster. Each war month etches deeper scars on Russia's standing. Its military exports, once a proud pillar of influence, have plummeted 92% from 2021 to 2024. Buyers shun Russia, witnessing equipment shredded by Ukrainian prowess, turning elsewhere. What a humiliation, watching a superpower's reputation evaporate in real time. Russia's aerospace dreams shatter too. Promises of over 1,000 civil aircraft by 2030? Delivered only 5 in 3 grueling years. The smell of jet fuel lingers, but the reality? Military aviation in tatters. The Russian Air Force limps at less than 75% of pre-war strength, losing 60 aircraft each year due to overuse and shoddy upkeep. Production crawls at just 26 new planes annually. Allies sour, relationships fraying. China siphons massive discounts on energy exports, using Russia as a stark warning against defying Western might. North Korea? Sending defective ammo and conscripts, fodder for the grinder. Iran supplies drones, yet watches Putin's empire erode like sand through clenched fists. And the twist? Russia hasn't budged on global goals, its isolation tightening like a noose. What unseen blow awaits next, as alliances crack and ambitions fade? Will this be the moment Russia's facade shatters completely? The echoes of failure grow louder, promising a storm none can predict. As the world watched, an insidious plan unfolded when the invasion of Ukraine began. Many, including President Vladimir Putin, believed it would be a swift victory, a mere flicker before the lights dimmed over Ukraine. Fast forward 3.5 years, and that initial belief seems absurd. Ukraine didn't just survive, it's poised to reclaim every inch of its land, highlighting Russia's desperate struggle to maintain its fading military power. As we delve into this astonishing turnaround, the question emerges: how did Ukraine turn the tide in its favor against such overwhelming odds? Caught in the gears of failure, Russia's military, once perceived as formidable, started to crumble under the weight of its own hubris. What Russia underestimated was Ukraine's resilience, turning setbacks into a fierce resolve. With every lost piece of equipment, each tank, aircraft, and artillery shell, Russia is depleting its once vast arsenal, filled with tools from the now distant glory days. Reports indicate that Russia has seen its military hardware erode to a point where it has lost over half of its available arsenal. Just think, 23,000 units destroyed or captured, compared to Ukraine's 9,900. This stark contrast paints a vivid picture of a country where hope and determination are shining brighter than ever. Yet, looming behind these statistics is the ticking clock of time. While Ukraine has focused on endurance and innovation, Russia has relied on outdated strategies and resources. The military might that once seemed inexhaustible is running on fumes.
With a staggering number of Soviet-era tanks rolling out, some even dating back to World War II.
It's almost as if Russia is sifting through a dusty attic, desperately pulling out relics of an empire, while Ukraine is busy forging a new path with modern techniques.
But how has Ukraine achieved this while Russia flounders? The answer lies in Ukraine's strategic brilliance.
They are targeting vital parts of Russia's logistics, knocking out crucial ammunition depots and oil refineries.
Imagine the thrill of knowing that one successful strike can ripple through the enemy's lines, crippling their entire operation.
Each explosion echoes with consequences, reducing the enemy's artillery fire and limping closer to the day when Ukraine can launch a powerful counteroffensive. As we dive deeper into this unexpected narrative, the aroma of urgency thickens. Economically, Russia is unraveling. Sanctions have bitten deeply, squeezing its oil and gas revenues, a lifeline that once sustained its military ambitions. With revenues plummeting and expenditures soaring, Putin's grip on power is threatened. As dissent brews in the shadows, his inner circle must consider their allegiances carefully, defend a sinking ship or seek new leadership in a time of calamity. Yet, the real twist unfolds as we recount Ukraine's military revolution. From the ashes, an industrial renaissance is emerging. Ukraine's defense industry is surging, projected to hit $35 billion in capacity by 2025. This is no longer just a fight for survival, it's a dawning era of retribution and resurgence. The Ukrainian forces now produce nearly all of their essential military hardware, showcasing innovation where others face decline. But the plot thickens further. The world watches as India and China emerge as unexpected allies in Russia's struggle, offering a shadow economy that further complicates the narrative, demanding steep discounts and deteriorating resources. How will Russia balance these challenges while Ukraine gains traction day by day? With riveting complexities and unforeseen turns, the battle for Ukraine's future is not merely a tale of warfare but of strategy, economics, and resilience. As the dust settles, the stakes rise. Each move is critical, and the road to reclaiming every inch of land is fraught with peril and potential. And in this chess game of power, who will emerge victorious? Only time has the answer. In the tumultuous landscape of warfare, where every movement holds the potential for triumph or disaster, Ukraine is navigating a complex battlefield. Its enemy? A beleaguered Russian military, once feared, now in retreat. The winds of change have blown through the Black Sea, pushing the Russian fleet to abandon Sevastopol, forced to flee under the pressure of relentless Ukrainian strikes. With supply lines stretched thin and no naval dominance to protect them, Russian forces in Crimea are becoming an island, increasingly isolated. The real challenge lies ahead, liberating Crimea. Ukraine is tirelessly working to reclaim territory that feels historically intertwined with its own identity. This is not just a battle for land but for the very soul of the nation. To pull off this audacious plan, Ukraine needs to seal the land corridor through southern Ukraine, cutting off Russian forces. Yet, the path is fraught with peril. How much longer can Ukraine stem the tide of its own resource depletion? While Ukraine celebrates incremental victories, each hard-fought win is shadowed by the staggering reality of troop shortages, dwindling military equipment, and an economy that requires unwavering Western support. However, the nation has proved time and again that investments made in its defense multiply the outcomes on the battlefield. Analogies of a fragile web are evocative. Despite the sanctions against Russia, the shadow of dependence lingers in the global supply chain's resilience. The stakes have risen dramatically, with neighboring countries sensing a golden opportunity to ramp up their support for Ukraine. As they bolster Ukraine's capabilities, they not only thwart Russian aggression but also hedge against a future conflict that could involve NATO. Predictions of Russia's economic collapse suggest a nation on the brink, with Putin potentially leaning on partnerships with China, relinquishing control of his wealth of resources for a desperate lifeline. The specter of an impending shift looms, one that could reshape the global landscape. For Russia, the prospect of fighting NATO may dwindle before it even begins. Each decision now echoed through the ages will dictate not just the outcome of this war, but the very existence of Russia as we know it.
As the world watches, the question remains, will Ukraine emerge victorious, rewriting the narrative of resilience and defiance?
Only time will tell, and we can only bear witness to this unfolding chapter of history.
In a collapsing regime, Putin might surrender Russia's vast resources for scraps from China, watching as his empire echoes the Soviet collapse, clinging to Western trade just to survive. We can only witness the drama unfold. But what if I told you Ukraine's victory could erase Russia from the map, turning Putin's aggression into his own extinction before NATO even blinks?
The ground already trembles underfoot, that metallic stench of burning fuel clinging to the air as refineries ignite, artillery roars fading into silence at ammunition depots crumbling. Feel the icy grip of isolation choking Crimea, waves crashing against a weakened fleet.
Ukraine's brilliant tactics aren't fading, they're soaring to new heights.
Dive into our exclusive look at Operation Spiderweb, where swirling drone tactics ensnare Russian convoys like a web-trapping prey. Who would have guessed cheap drones could shatter a superpower? Each strike ripples outward, blowing apart a depot, leaves enemy guns silent for weeks, the acrid smoke swirling like dark omens.
Strikes on oil refineries starve Russia's coffers and choke its tanks, the oily slick coating everything in defeat.
Peace talks? A mirage. As Russia hits its breaking point, projected by Western spies before 2026, shortages of armor will crush its assaults.
Equipment evaporates, reserves running dry at an alarming pace.
Imagine Ukraine unleashing counteroffensives, troops advancing 4.8 miles daily, liberating over 3,700 square miles while Russia's ghosts scrape up World War II relics, the thunder of outdated shells echoing their desperation.
Holding territory? Ukraine's drone swarms make it effortless.
Eyes in the sky spot every enemy whisper, every convoy crunching through mud, sheep machines in hordes, pulverizing movements before they form. Russia's feeble attempts look pathetic, their advances dwindling from 282 square miles to mere scraps. You can almost hear the whine of Ukrainian drones overhead, the explosive pops of precise strikes turning armored beasts into scrap metal. Liberating Crimea, the ultimate challenge, now dangles. In the shadow of a brutal conflict that reshaped a nation, Ukraine grappled with an existential crisis. When Russia launched its invasion in February 2022, the world anticipated a swift and decisive victory for the aggressor. In chilling belief, many thought it would take mere weeks for Ukraine's government to collapse, leading to an inevitable regime change. However, as time wore on, it became painfully clear, this was no mere exercise in aggression. Fast forward 3.5 years, and the landscape paints a different picture altogether.
Ukraine has not only endured but is on the brink of reclaiming its homeland. This isn't just a tale of survival, it's a story of resurgence, a gripping saga set in the backdrop of turmoil that saw Russia's once mighty military kneel before unyielding determination and strategic ingenuity. How could a country left for dead rise from the ashes? The truth lies in cold statistics and undeniable realities. With dwindling resources and collapsing morale, Russia is running out of time, equipment, and options, while Ukraine fortifies its resolve. In a startling revelation, reports indicate Russia has already lost over half of its military hardware.
Up to September 2025, documented losses by Ukrainian forces amounted to a staggering 23,000 units, while Ukraine's losses stood at just under 10,000. This stark contrast illuminated the peril Russia faced, a reflection of its weakening grip on power. As casualties mounted, Russia's armored units transformed from advanced tanks to relics of past wars. Reports state that by May 2022, they were deploying the aging T-62 tanks. And by November 2024, whispers of T-34s, a model last engaged in combat during World War II, hinted at the severity of their aviation crisis. This haunting shift signals not a temporary setback but an outright signal of despair. Yet, the tides have changed. By early 2025, Ukrainian military capabilities had surged, capturing significant territories and obliterating Russian advances. An analysis from British intelligence revealed that Russian gains plummeted dramatically, from over 282 square miles in November 2024 to a meager 51 square miles by March 2025. What could stifle a juggernaut like the Russian military? A strategic transformation led by General Mikhailo Drapati disrupted their logistics, resulting in dramatic consequences on the battlefield.
The clash echoed with undeniable noise, explosions resonating like thunder, drones buzzing like angry hornets, and soldiers pressed into combat.
Each day, as rain fell on besieged landscapes, it felt like a countdown to an inevitable collapse of Russia's will.
But just how long could this go on? As both sides tangled in a desperate fight, economic pressures mounted.
While Russia's military expenditure consumed an astonishing 40% of its budget, its economy crumbled beneath the weight of sanctions and plummeting revenues. The financial crisis tightened its grip, shaping the outcome of the conflict with each passing month. Reports indicated oil and gas revenues dropped by 35% year-on-year, devastation for a nation reliant on its natural resources. Amidst this growing chaos, Ukraine transformed its narrative from defender to innovator in warfare.
With drone production surging as their industry flourished like never before.
By 2025, its defense production capacity jumped to an incredible $35 billion, a leap from just $1 billion at the war's onset. Ukraine had devised and executed long-range strikes that struck deep into Russian territory, taking out key military assets with precision that stunned the world. With each powerful strike, the reality of the situation crystallized. Russia's manpower crisis further compounded its challenges. As casualties surged past the grim mark of 1 million since the invasion began, the statistics became increasingly bleak. The report from the Ukrainian initiative, I Want to Live, noted 281,550 Russian soldiers either killed or missing in the first 8 months of 2025, and daily losses climbed from 560 in the war's inception to over 1,300. The sobering question emerged: could Russia replenish its ranks in time? The answer was grim. Reports indicated a staggering 60% drop in enlistment rates, and with the option of recruiting from prisons dwindling, desperation pushed Moscow to seek foreign assistance. Requests poured in for North Korean troops, yet even these reinforcements were a drop in the bucket. This human cost rippled through Russian society, with working-age men simply vanishing from the workforce and no one to take their place. As the military constituted 3% of the labor force by 2025, it symbolized not just a tactical failure but a fundamental destabilization of their future.
How would Russia confront this catastrophe?
The question loomed large as the balance of power hung in a delicate balance.
As Ukraine embraced a new dawn of military innovation, contrasting with Russia's spiraling descent into chaos, one truth echoed loudly: the fate of nations hung in the balance, each moment determining echoes in history that would resonate for generations.
Ukraine's story is evolving from despair to rebirth, and the world watches, breathless, as the page turns towards an uncertain future.
What will happen next? Did Russia just doom itself by invading Ukraine back in 2022?
Imagine the bitter sting of victory slipping away as your army crumbles, piece by shattered piece, while your enemy grows unstoppable.
That's the shocking reality Putin faces now. With Ukraine poised to reclaim every lost territory, Russia burns through tanks, shells, and soldiers in futile assaults, each one inching Ukraine closer to total liberation. These desperate meat waves and dwindling artillery doom Putin's forces, setting the stage for Ukraine's unstoppable counteroffensive. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, President Vladimir Putin believed in a swift triumph. He pictured a weeks-long campaign, the Ukrainian government crumbling, troops surrendering, and Russian flags waving over Kiev before the West could react. Over 3.5 years later, that vision mocks him. Ukraine not only endures but stands ready to achieve the unthinkable, retaking every occupied inch. Russia, with all its bravado, will incinerate its military might trying, and failing, to stop it. This isn't fantasy or spin, it's hard math and brutal strategy converging into a storm that could shatter Putin's grip. Russia hemorrhages time, gear, cash, and choices. Ukraine evolves stronger, sharper, deadlier each month. By the insider's analysis, verified by Western spies, Russia has lost over half its arsenal. Oryx tracks nearly 23,000 Russian units destroyed, damaged, or seized since 2022, against Ukraine's 9,900 figures through September 2025, 43 months in. Even focusing on total losses, 10,300 Russian armored vehicles gone versus Ukraine's 3,800. Russia began with 13,000 to 16,000 tanks and 11,400 carriers, massive depletions from Soviet stockpiles, finite and vanishing fast.
National Interest noted 12,000 reserve tanks pre-war. Now, they're nearly extinguished. Analyst Andrew Tarasenko warns reparable reserves could run dry in 12 to 18 months without 700,000 annual vehicles.
Russia's factories?
They churn out 250 T-90M tanks and 460 BMP-3 vehicles yearly, pitiful against losses.
Desperate, they've yanked ancient hardware, modern T-72s and T-80s first, then remade T-62s by May 2022, whispers of World War II T-34s by November 2024. A grim signal.
Ukraine counters with warfare redefined, layered defenses, surveillance swarms, drones blocking Russian momentum. By 2025, Russian gains dive, 51 square miles seized in March 2025 alone, per British intel and deep state. Down from 74 in February, 125 in January, 282 in November 2024. Each square kilometer now demands over 35 assaults, up from 14.2 in February and 7.1 in November.
5 times the effort for meager returns.
Ukraine's General Mikhailo Drechicky's 2025 moves turbocharged this. He obliterated logistics, rotated brigades for refresh, fortified Pokrovsk.
By September 2025, Ukraine seized Pokrovsk area, trapping Russians in 3 gauntlets.
At Dnipropetrovsk, 100 captured, 1,300 slain, 1,100 wounded. Pankivka cleared, drones butchered advances, with only 1 of 10 soldiers surviving to yield.
Ukraine claimed 62 square kilometers in one 2025 month, shredding Putin's all directions boasts. Russia's crisis deepens in economic ruin, escalating monthly.
Its economy fuels wars but falters, inviting sanctions slicing funds. Oil and gas once filled 30 to 50% of coffers, revenues sank 35% year-on-year by May 2025. Military devours 40% of budget, Soviet levels reborn. Putin/2026 spending 4.4%, confessing defeat in pace.
Inflation?
Officially 8 to 10%, but food and essentials spike to 20+.
Reserves deplete by late 2025 or early 2026. Central bank warns liquidity woes, banks on verge of cascade collapse.
Russia juggles with caps, rate plunges, meddling in vital systems, straining war efforts and living standards. Ukraine exploits this, pummeling with drone strikes. They wrecked 17% of Russian oil refining, per Reuters, slashing revenues by equal measure from 2024 to 2025. EU capped oil at $60 then $48 per barrel, crashing Russian crude from 70 to 50 in a year.
By 2027, EU dumps Russian imports.
Russia pivots to China and India, paying 35% discounts. Shadow fleet ships dodge scrutiny with fake flags, but they're decaying, inspected often, hiking costs, gutting profits. As Russia scraped Soviet-era dregs, Ukraine flourishes in a military rebirth. Defense output hits $35 billion in 2025, from $1 billion in 2022. They forge 1/3 of weapons, ammo, gear domestically.
Drones?
Nearly all 100% West lacks scale without red tape. Quality surpasses quantity, with innovation dazzling fields.
Ukraine bets on smashing Russia's irreplaceables to tilt the fight.
High-value gear, supply webs, ammo caches, fuel plants all prime targets. Picture Satan systems shattering skies.
Ammo dumps exploding in thunderous cascades, oil towers billowing acrid smoke. Each hit multiplies chaos, silencing artillery barrages for weeks across fronts.
One refinery loss means dwindling exports and fuel for troops, choking fleets and tanks with fumes of failure.
Shutting down S-400 defenses? It slashes barriers, unleashing Ukrainian jets and drones like eagles free from cages. Is Russia finally cracking under this relentless sting, or does a darker reckoning await?
Phase 2 ignites once Russia's crest-shattered synapses, before or in 2026, per Western eyes.
Armor drought halts advances, shifting sway.
Ukraine harnesses booming home production, allied aid, nimble tactics for synchro counterstrikes. Think 2022 Kharkiv push, Ukrainian troops surged 4.8 miles daily, freeing 3,700 square miles swift as summer storms.
With Russia hoarding antique T-34s and retro cannons? Ukraine's potential multiplies, blades sharpened by foes' collapse. Can Putin halt this avalanche, or is his empire crumbling like dry leaves in the wind? What's the twist as Ukraine claws back ground, trapping Russians in webs of drone hell? Phase 3 twinkles in holding reclaimed lands, stymieing comeback lunges. Ukrainians' drone fleets shine as saviors, contravailing every sneaky retread.
Though Russia might scrape together scraps for more assaults, they face a battlefield where every truck hum, troop huddle, convoy crunch gets spotted and erased by swarms of bargain drones buzzing like angry swarms. Imagine the agony of defeat, sightless skies, earth-shaking blasts, stench of burning metal as hopes dissolve. Will Crimea's liberation deliver the crushing blow, isolating desperation amid gleaming victories? Ukraine's final gauntlet awaits, prying Crimea loose. Yet Russia's endgame fractures already. Black Sea Fleet bolted Sebastopol from surging strikes. Kerch Bridge quivers under long-range muzzles, naval dominance gone, lines stretched taut to snap. Crimea dangles isolated, encircled soon as Ukraine pries the land bridge, winds of freedom howling, tides of fate crashing in. Every irreplaceable tank wasted, shell from North Korean dwindles detonated, soldier in meat waves felled, these pave victory's path, Russia's pleas fading into war's cold echo. As Ukraine presses this brutal symphony, does Putin's regime tremble on the edge, ready to shatter at the next thunderclap? In the shadow of the tumultuous battlefield, a gripping story unfolds. By 2025, Russia's military presence accounted for a staggering 3% of its labor force, a notable rise from previous years. However, this statistic belies a grim reality: young men of working age are being systematically removed from the workforce, sent to the front lines in Ukraine, where many meet their tragic end. This relentless cycle is compounded by Russia's plunging fertility rates dating from the 1990s, resulting in a significant absence of an entire generation ready to step into the roles needed to sustain the nation. One analytical study reveals a drastic shortage. In 2022 alone, 1.33 million individuals aged between 16 and 35 vanished from the labor pools. The repercussions are multifaceted, creating an immense labor deficit that appears insurmountable. Russian media acknowledges the military's dire need for up to 120,000 engineers, with total manpower deficiencies estimated to hover around 400,000. The consequences of these shortages are dire. Russia finds itself locked in an attritional conflict, one they can no longer hope to win. Forbes projects that, at its current pace in April 2025, capturing merely 68 square miles each month would lead to a staggering 230 years needed to occupy all of Ukraine. With casualties reaching 1,200 soldiers daily, an estimation suggests a catastrophic loss of 100 million Russians, which is nearly 70% of the current population. Clearly, such a war is unsustainable. Something must yield. Evidence strongly indicates that it will be Russia's military might that crumbles, not Ukraine's resolve to resist. Turning back to the mounting shortages of military equipment, the absence of armored vehicles, artillery, and air defenses renders Russia incapable of launching significant offensive operations. In desperate attempts to compensate, Russian forces have resorted to sending waves of infantry into combat, exposing them to fierce resistance and leading to catastrophic casualties that yield little to no advantage. In stark contrast, Ukrainian defenses grow ever more formidable. General Alexander Syrsky highlighted that as late as June 2025, Ukrainian forces maintained control over portions of territory in Kursk despite the ongoing invasion, showcasing resilience that Russia underestimated. As the tides turn, what unforeseen strategies will emerge from the ashes of this conflict? Will Ukraine harvest these fleeting moments of strength, or will Russian desperation shape a different nightmare? Each twist brings with it a fresh narrative, leaving the world to wonder how this unfolding drama will ultimately conclude. In a previous section, we explored Ukraine's soaring long-range strike tools. Starting with simple surveillance drones, they now strike deep into Russian soil, targeting bases, depots, and oil sites from hundreds of miles away. This prowess shreds Russia's vital infrastructure, leaving its forces exposed in a crumbling shell. Can you believe how far these drones have come? From buzzing quietly overhead to unleashing chaos on distant targets. The thunder of explosions? The acrid smoke choking the air? It all tells a story of relentless change. Picture the shock of Operation Spiderweb.
It pushed limits to insane lengths over 2,700 miles into enemy lands, striking down about a third of Russia's strategic bomber fleet, leaving hulks of metal strewn like forgotten relics, twisted and scorched from the blasts. Their power vanished in a haze of defeat. What does this twist reveal? A sudden shift where the hunted becomes the hunter. Ukraine doesn't just defend, it shatters empires from afar.
Now, twist the lens further. Beyond machines and money lies Russia's deepest wound.
A human catastrophe that's ripping its army apart at the seams. Rhetorical question: how can a nation endure when its soldiers simply disappear?
The stench of blood-soaked earth. The screams echoing through misty trenches.
These aren't just stats, they're cries for lost lives. Russia has bled over 1 million casualties since this brutal saga began. Numbers that crush the soul. Reports from Ukraine's I Want to Live initiative detail the horror. In just the first 8 months of 2025, 281,550 Russian troops were killed, wounded, or vanished on the battlefield. Of those, 86,744 confirmed dead. Nearly 34,000 missing, probably corpses awaiting grim discovery. The daily toll? A nightmarish ascent. From 560 lives lost each day in November 2022 to over 1,300 now. If this relentless grind persists, Russia faces another 440,000 annual mortalities, nearly matching the carnage of its first 3 years. An avalanche that's burying dreams and leaving voids in families. How does a superpower keep fighting with this gaping hole? Recruitment crumbles. Monthly drafts are barely enough, or worse, falling short. Enlistments plunged up to 60% from 2024 to early 25. Desperation forces dark choices. Prisoners? Nearly all tapped out. Calls for North Korean allies? 2 waves arrive, but they're mere droplets in a desert storm. Too few to shift the tide in this endless war. The fallout spreads like poison. By 2025, the military devours 3% of Russia's workforce, up 40% from 2020. Young men yanked from factories and fields. Erased forever on distant fronts. The air feels thinner. The grip of fear tighter. Touch the cold steel of an empty uniform, and you sense the irreversible loss. Cliffhanger moment, but here's the gut punch shift. Ukraine's rebirth isn't done. Next revelations expose Putin's final gambits and how they backfire spectacularly. Will Russia crumble under this weight, or ignite one last, fatal spark? The turn unfolds with searing tension. Imagine a high-stakes game of chess, where one player moves forward with confidence, believing victory is within reach. But what happens when the tables turn? This is the story of Ukraine, a nation that faced overwhelming odds following Russia's invasion. In those dark days of February 2022, few imagined the Ukrainian resistance would not only endure but rise stronger than before. As the world watched, Russia expected a swift conquest. They thought the Ukrainian government would crumble under pressure, with Russian flags waving proudly over Kiev. Now, 3 years later, that prediction seems absurd. Ukraine stands on the brink of reclaiming its occupied territories, while Russia, laden with its own blunders, edges closer to defeat. What if I told you that Ukraine's survival is less about luck and more about math and strategy? The countdown for Russia's military might has begun. They're running out of everything: time, equipment, and cash. In stark contrast, Ukraine is evolving, growing more capable and strategic with each passing month. Detailed analyses reveal that Russia has lost over half of its military hardware, with an astonishing 23,000 Russian units destroyed, damaged, or captured by Ukrainian forces since the invasion began. As they grapple with these losses, Russian forces see their once impressive stockpiles dwindling. Most of their equipment, relics from the Soviet era, cannot easily be replenished. Military experts warn that Russia's equipment reserves could be exhausted in under 2 years unless they ramp up production to levels they simply cannot achieve. Picture this: after exhausting modern tanks, Russia is left scrambling for antiquated models like the T-62, once retired from the battlefield. On the other hand,
Ukraine is quietly revolutionizing its approach to warfare. With improved defensive strategies and advanced reconnaissance, they have effectively turned the tide. By early 2025, Russian territorial advances had plummeted, with their monthly gains dwindling from over 280 square miles in November 2024 to just 51 in March 2025. But the battlegrounds are changing. How does one assess the desperate costs of warfare? In March alone, Russian forces were forced to conduct over 35 attacks for every square kilometer gained. This escalating cost illustrates a staggering shift in momentum. The appointment of General Mikhailo Drapati marked a turning point. His focus on logistics and troop rotations crippled Russian advances significantly. As the months rolled on, Ukraine made rapid territorial gains, leveraging technology to encircle enemy troops. Can you imagine the chaos on Russian lines as Ukrainian aerial strikes pepper their formations? In September, Ukrainian forces captured over 62 square kilometers in a month, shattering Russian claims of steady advancement. Yet, Russia is beset with economic challenges that mirror its military woes. With oil and gas revenues plummeting, defense spending is projected to decline. Inflation is on the rise, further straining their resources. But as Ukraine capitalizes on these weaknesses, they unleash devastating drone strikes, targeting Russian supply lines and crippling their economic foundation. However, the challenge of liberating Crimea looms large. What awaits on the horizon? The tense balance between war and peace, titans of industry, and the will of a nation could tilt in either direction. As the drums of war echo and the landscape shifts, will Crimea remain under Russian control, or will Ukraine's resilience forge a new beginning?